By the time the last great Mughal leader Aurangzeb died in 1707, the Europeans were well established in India. It was the Portuguese who were the first to begin trading when, in 1498, the explorer Vasco da Gama landed at Calicut, having sailed via the Cape of Good Hope. He arrived in Malabar looking for a mythical Christian empire and for spices, particularly pepper, which were in great demand in Europe. Knowing that the island of Goa had an excellent harbor, the Portuguese set about conquering it, the first annexation of Indian territory by a European power since that of Alexander the Great. Throughout the 16th century, the Portuguese managed to send valuable cargoes back to Europe and to construct impressive buildings in India. There were at least 50 major Portuguese forts in India and many minor fortifications. It wasn't long before other European countries followed Portugal's lead and took advantage of India's commerce. In the 17th century, England, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark floated East India companies. Chartered as trading companies by their respective governments, they sought chiefly Indian textiles, silk, cotton, and indigo. The Dutch and English soon emerged as the dominant European powers, however, as both countries had developed navies which could outfight the clumsy Portuguese galleons. The East India Company, established by English merchants in 1600, was to be strictly for peaceful trade. Having obtained a royal charter to pursue their ambitions in the East, the merchants had guns on their ships only for defense against European and other rivals. A major reason for the company's success was its policy of religious tolerance, attracting skilled artisans and merchants from all communities. Slowly but surely, the English company expanded, and many Indian rulers allowed it to establish trading posts, including those at Chennai and Kolkata. In 1662, the English king Charles Ill married a Portuguese princess, and as part of her dowry, received the islands of Mumbai, which were transferred to the company. Indian textiles became the fashion in England, and by the end of the century, they had far overtaken spices as the company's main source of income. The Portuguese were defeated in the Far East by the Dutch and constantly attacked by them on the high seas. This pushed the Portuguese into a decline in India, which was accelerated by their attempts to maintain too many forts and garrisons. The Dutch then returned to India and captured the Portuguese bases in the south, including that at Kochi. The Portuguese holed up in Goa, which fell into decay. The Dutch themselves became involved in wars with Indian rulers, and the expense of these forced them to scale down their operations. With the Portuguese and Dutch both being eclipsed, it seemed that at the dawn of the 18th century, England was in the ascendant. The Dutch soon shifted their focus to Indonesia, and the Portuguese were no longer a significant threat. The real contest was between the English and the French. It was in Bengal that the English made the first successful bid for rule in India. In 1757 and again in 1765, they defeated the Bengal ruler. This was made easier by the vacuum left after the disintegration of the Mughal Empire that followed the death of Aurangzeb. There were successful wars against the Marathas and the Sikhs, and the Punjab and a number of other states were annexed. In other places, particularly in Rajasthan and Hyderabad, treaties with local rulers took away many of their powers. A huge army, comprised mostly of Indians, facilitated this expansion, and by 1850, most of India was either directly or indirectly under British rule. A new system of administration was put into place, which has remained largely unaltered to this day. Each district was put under the charge of a collector, who was answerable to the governor of the province. There was a separate police service, and an independent judicial system was created. The British made fundamental changes to the ownership of land. Previously, although the right to part of the revenue from crops had been asserted by the state or its assignees, the owner of the land had been the peasant cultivator. The British, seeing similarities between those who took the tax revenue and large landlords in Britain, changed the system. The person who had collected the tax became the legal owner of the land and was responsible for paying the tax to the government. The peasant became a tenant who paid part of his crop to the landlord. This new system left the peasant at the mercy of the landlord and resulted in many of the new landlords defaulting on their tax and being forced to sell. Much land passed from the control of local families to merchants and bankers in the cities, who were only interested in extracting the maximum return from their investment. The new landlords became enthusiastic supporters of British rule. Slavery was abolished in India in 1843, but many of the peasants were little more than serfs, bought and sold with the land. Unscrupulous moneylenders also reduced many to debt bondage. Kolkata was the British capital in India. It also became the center of what came to be known as the Hindu Renaissance, where an Anglo-Indian synthesis of culture grew up. Hindu College, where the Kolkata intelligentsia sent their sons, was founded in 1816, and 2 years later the city boasted India's first public library. There was a keen desire among many of India's elite, in the south as well as the north, to learn more about Western science and culture, and to learn English. In 1835, the company decided to make English the medium for the education it financed. English replaced Persian as the official language of the administration and higher courts. Ambitious Indians, who wanted jobs in the civil service or in the British companies that were coming to India, realized that English was the key to advancement. In 1857, the universities of Delhi, Chennai, and Kolkata were founded. Under British rule, there was considerable development of the Indian economy. Large-scale irrigation was used to great effect, particularly in the Punjab, and raw cotton and jute became major exports. But the most profitable crop was opium. The East India Company needed something to export to China to pay for the tea it was exporting from there to Britain, and opium, although illegal, was much in demand. The company encouraged the planting of the poppy in India, and the crop was bought by the East India Company for auction in Calcutta and onward transmission to China. By 1838, India was exporting 4 million pounds of opium a year. It had become the world's most valuable trade commodity.